Southern Water wants to turn treated sewage into drinking water for Hampshire homes. The scheme would tackle shortages and take pressure off rivers, but it would mean mixing recycling with spring water in a new reservoir that's being built at Havant. Mike Owens is from Hayling's Sewage Watch and says Southern Water could save almost 10 times as much water by fixing leaks.
Southern Water are losing about 140 million litres per day of the water they've paid a lot of money to treat. There's 15 million litres of recycled water being taken to the reservoir, and that's about 10% of what they're losing through leakage. They need to fix the leaks.
To you, it's 7:09. Now, Southern Water plans to turn treated sewage into drinking water. It says the scheme would tackle shortages and take the pressure off Hampshire's rivers, but the idea is proving controversial. Our Hampshire and Isle of Wight reporter Dominic Blake's been looking into this. He joins me now in Portsmouth. Morning to you, Dom. What's all this about?
Good morning to you, Alan. Well, it would be part of Britain's biggest ever water resource project. And as you say, the aim is to tackle a serious water shortage here in the south, and one which is getting worse because of development and climate change. And Southern Water says it would also have a real environmental benefit because it would mean that they had to take out less water from environmentally sensitive rivers like the Itchen and the Test. Now, it was hoping to solve this problem by a desalination scheme, so by removing salt from seawater over at Fawley, but that idea was rejected in an earlier consultation. So this is plan B, really. The idea now it's pushing forward is to purify treated sewage, and that would involve about 15 million litres a day being pumped up to a new reservoir that's being built up at Havant, and after treatment that would then go on for further work down at Farlington, and eventually it would come through the taps in places like Portsmouth, Havant, Fareham, Gosport and Southampton.
OK, and how have people been reacting to this plan, Dom?
Well, opponents of the scheme accept, Alan, that the science is perfectly sound. You can do this using reverse osmosis, but they say that there's a lack of trust with Southern Water. They don't really want Southern Water having anything to do with their drinking water supply, and they point to the company's track record of releasing sewage into the harbours and into the Solent. So another concern is the disruption that could be caused as well, because it would need a lot of new infrastructure. A new recycling plant, for example, would have to be built on landfill at Broadmarsh. There'd be something like 40 kilometres of new pipelines that would have to be laid, and those would go through Havant and Lee Park and right on to Otterbourne near Winchester. And other people, Alan, that I've been speaking to about the scheme say that there are better ways of tackling this shortage. For example, they say that if they just brought forward plans to fix leaky pipes, they could save something like nearly 10 times as much water as this scheme would generate. So the figures from Southern Water there, they are planning to cut the amount of leaky pipes they've got by 50%, but they say that will take another 27 years and work that won't be done by 2050. And I've also been speaking to people who've got environmental concerns, Alan. Here's Anne Buckley from Havant Borough Residents Association.
People are very sensitive about what they drink. And one of our really big concerns, and that's the reason that we're focusing the campaign on this because it's very understandable, is that we feel a lot of people will end up buying bottled water, which is, it's obviously an expense, but it's very bad for the environment in terms of waste and transporting heavy bottles of water and so forth. And the recycled water does taste different. It will taste different. Southern Water will tell you that. It has a more salty taste to it. And of course, just psychologically, some people wouldn't be happy. Like often when people travel abroad, they often don't like the source of the water and buy bottled water. But to be doing that all the time for a family would be very damaging, I think.
Dom, could you explain a bit more about this scheme and the impact on Havant Thicket Reservoir?
Yes, Havant Thicket Reservoir is being built now. That's a Portsmouth water scheme that got planning permission partly because of the environmental benefits it would bring, and those include wetlands for birds and having a reservoir that was filled with pure spring water. And there is concern that those benefits might be lost if this scheme goes ahead, because the reservoir would be receiving this recycled water, so that would be mixing with the spring water up there, and that's a real issue for local people, because the purity of water around Havant has been absolutely famous since Roman times. And in fact, even in the Middle Ages, a whole industry was founded in Havant because of the purity of the spring water, because it allowed people to make parchment that was almost pure white, and that was used around the world. And indeed, a thriving industry grew up around that, which survived well into modern times. So people are also concerned that this will be sort of downgrading their spring water reservoir as well, Alan.
Dominic Blake in Portsmouth for us this morning. Listening to that is Tracy Viney, an environmental expert who used to work for a water company. Tracy, good morning. This scheme sounds like it might not be ideal for some people, but certainly there's nothing wrong with the science of it.
Morning, Alan. I listened to your show in the morning, and I just wanted to thank you for raising these issues and letting Portsmouth water customers know about the plans to recycle treated effluent. And I hope everyone will get involved in the consultation and let them know what they think about this. I'm sure Southern Water will be telling you that they can treat this water safely, but I think, as has already been raised, it's an issue of trust. Southern Water have got a very poor reputation locally with respect to pollution incidents and maintenance issues. And the question is, will people trust them to recycle the water and use it in their drinking water?
Is there any issue between the mixing of spring water and recycled water in the reservoir, or is that just one of having to come to terms with new science? What's your reaction to that?
Well, I'm really concerned about the potential impacts on water quality in the reservoir. I think it will change salinity. I think it will impact temperatures and algal blooms, and all of that will have an adverse impact on biodiversity. The fact that they want to keep the reservoir topped up with recycled water all the time means you won't get the natural seasonal variation you would have got when you were pumping spring water up primarily in the winter. And so that will have a massive adverse effect on the biodiversity net gain that was promised when the reservoir got planning permission. There's also impacts for Langstone Harbour. There would have been a reduction in nitrates going to the harbour as a result of spring water going up to the reservoir. We've already got big problems in the harbour with algal blooms, and so that hasn't really been looked at. In fact, none of the environmental impact assessments or the habitats regulation assessments that need to be done have been done yet by Southern Water. So they're pressing ahead on this, even though they don't know what the environmental impacts will be. And then, as has been mentioned already, there's all the construction impacts of a 40-kilometre pipeline, and the fact that customers will have to pay for 3 Olympic-sized swimming pools of this water to be treated every day and pumped 40 kilometres, even when they don't need the water. And I think the expense of running this scheme, it will become a white elephant that customers still have to pay for the next 70 years, even when it's not being used.
Tracy, aren't Southern Water kind of damned if they do, damned if they don't? Because we're expecting another hot year this year. Potentially that's more droughts. If you have a water supply, you need to keep that water supply plentiful, it needs to be reliable, and it needs investment. So this is an option which would fulfil some of that brief of which they are obliged to provide.
Absolutely, and we absolutely need lots of water and a reliable source of water. But for me, this isn't the right solution. It's not a sustainable solution. Climate change is going to bring wetter winters and drier summers, and we need to invest in solutions that collect more winter rain and store it underground in confined aquifers where it won't evaporate, so the aquifers are topped up before each summer, so there's plenty of supplies in the summer. We should be building more winter storage reservoirs. We've had lots of flooding, even down on the Itchen this year already. If we store more winter rain, that will reduce the flood risk and create new wetland habitats, which is great for biodiversity. There are other solutions, but Southern Water aren't looking seriously enough at them.
Tracy, finally, how can people have their say on this? How can they find out a little bit more?
We would encourage everyone to go and have a look at the Havant Matters website. We've put lots of information on there to give people an idea of things that they want to think about. They should make up their own minds about this, but the most important thing is they have got concerns. They need to contact DEFRA. All the consultation materials are on links on the website, and also there are links to DEFRA so that you can do a consultation response. But the key thing is to have a look and decide for yourself about what you think about having recycled effluent in your drinking water.
That's Tracy Viney. Thank you, Tracy, an environmental expert who used to work for a water company. She's also helped get approval for the new reservoir at Havant Thicket, but opposes the scheme to fill it up with a recycled sewage. It's 18 minutes past. Water wants to turn treated sewage into drinking water for Portsmouth, Fareham, Gosport and Southampton. It would tackle water shortages and take the pressure off Hampshire's rivers. But campaigners say they don't trust the company. Others worry that they'd be forced to sell their homes or gardens to make way for a new pipeline that would run through Havant and Lee Park and onto Otterbourne near Winchester. One of them is Sally Codling.
I'm one of the hundreds of people who about a year ago received a letter from Southern Water with a plan of our house and garden, with the information that some of our land and garden might be, our house, our property may be required for use on one of the pipeline routes, and they spoke of compulsory purchase orders. So we were told that we had to contact their agent, Southern Water's agent, which were German Fisher, and when we tried to contact them, they really had no information to give us at all. And we were told that we should maybe employ somebody to act for us. As it turned out, many of the pipeline routes were ruled out, and a year later, 6 months to 8 months later, we received another letter to tell that us personally, our property wasn't on the preferred pipeline route. But there are hundreds of people that, all the way up to Otterbourne, that are on the route, and people really have had very little information from Southern Water, despite having asked repeatedly for it. And people on our Facebook group just really are very concerned that if they're going to have pipelines through their property, under their property, people are very unaware at the moment, and we've been given very little information.
Sally Codling there with her perspective. Listening to that is Anne Buckley from the Havant Borough Residents Alliance. Anne, good morning. Welcome to the show.
Yes, good morning, Alan. Thank you for inviting me on this morning.
Most welcome. Now, Southern Water's perspective, I think, might be something along the lines of, if you want to fix leaky pipes, that's going to take years to find them, dig them up, a massive disruption. They estimate it will take over 20 years. And in order to make sure that everyone has got water, you've got to have ideas to provide that, and this is one of them.
Yes, I think we've really done a lot of investigation here and looked at all that's been suggested. And Tracy Viney, who was on earlier, who is a great expert in the field and worked for Portsmouth Water Company, has said clearly there are a lot of other areas that could be looked at. We're not short of rain in this area. We've actually had a lot of flooding recently. And what they're suggesting with this recycling of effluent or sewage is generally used. In fact, this particular system has always been used in areas of drought, not in countries where there is plenty of rainfall.
And am I right in thinking that it's the science of treating sewage water for you isn't the main issue? The main issue is along the lines of why is it necessary, and if they did go down this route, the massive amount of disruption and then the mixing of water. Is that the essence of it?
Yes, that's the essence of it. We're concerned, for two reasons really. One is that a lot of residents, if this system does go ahead, simply will choose not to drink this water and will buy bottled water, which is so that will be a backward step in terms of waste and transport and so forth of bottles. But the other point, and it's a really massive point in this area, is the disruption to the environment. All these routes across the countryside have huge impact on the ecology, and particularly here in Havant, the route up from Bedhampton and Havant Springs through Lee Park and up to the reservoir will cause enormous damage along those routes. And in addition to that, and it's a point that Tracy made earlier that I think is very important, is that it would change the water in the reservoir. The whole planning consent was given on the basis that this would be a gain to ecology locally. We would have a new wetland which residents would enjoy and so forth. And a lot of evidence is coming out that this will damage the ecology further, and we want very much to get that message across, and residents are very, very concerned.
And aside from the disruption then and the processes involved, do you have a preferred scheme, a preferred idea that you think perhaps Southern Water have not considered enough?
We feel there's plenty of water available in this area, and that they need to find other ways of storing water. We haven't actually got a shortage of water. It's often said that there's a shortage of water in this area. There's not. There's greater demand coming through with more homes coming into the area, and a lot of the water is being pumped across with this plan to other areas. So we feel that Southern Water must look further at other options. This appears to be a very easy option for them because the reservoir has been approved. It's a Portsmouth Water Reservoir, and it seems an easy way of them making more use of that and using their basically sort of effluent from the sewage works. And their whole reputation of Southern Water is so low in this area because we've had decades of pollution into Portsmouth and Langston harbours. So we don't trust Southern Water, and we certainly don't trust them to be taking on our water supply, whereas we've had, with the existing systems, we've had enormous confidence in Portsmouth Water.
Okay.
So I think they've got to come forward. They've got to spend more time on this and look more closely at all the ecological issues and present us with further information, basically.
And thank you for your time this morning. Anne Buckley, Havant resident there from Havant Residents Alliance. And 8 minutes past 8, good morning. Now, Southern Water wants to turn treated sewage into drinking water. It says the recycling scheme would help tackle shortages and take pressure off Hampshire's rivers. But the idea is proving controversial. Our Hampshire and Isle of Wight reporter Dominic Blake is in Portsmouth for us this morning, joining me live. Dom, perhaps an explanation of how this would work?
Well, the science is there, Alan. It's quite a clever process that would use reverse osmosis to purify millions of litres of water every day, and that would be pumped up to a new reservoir that's already being built at Havant. But after further treatment, that would then go on to supply places like Portsmouth, Havant, Fareham and Gosport with drinking water, and it would also be pumped under this plan over to Otterbourne, just south of Winchester, and that would be used then to supply the Southampton area. And Southern Water says it's a scheme which would reduce the amount of water that it's having to take out of environmentally sensitive rivers, particularly the Test, and that it would also help to provide a secure water source for Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, where water supplies are under increasing pressure because of increased demand from development and also because of climate change, Alan.
And a lot of local people very unhappy about this, Dom.
Yes, local groups in fact gathered at a protest in Havant because it will mean mixing recycled effluent with water in this reservoir that's being built up at Havant Thicket. And opponents of that scheme say that it was given planning permission, or Portsmouth Water was given planning permission for that scheme, partly on the basis that it would be full of spring water. And there were a lot of people at this protest who just really couldn't stomach the idea of drinking water that once started life as sewage, no matter how pure it had been made. And a lot of people also talked about a lack of trust in the company, pointing to Southern Water's record. But there are other concerns, Alan, as well, about the amount of infrastructure that would be needed and the disruption that could bring. It would need something like 40 kilometres of new pipeline being built across the south, and even the local authority has some concerns. Here's Alex Rennie, who's leader of Havant Borough Council.
I think people rightly don't trust Southern Water because of their records in our area, particularly around the storm overflows and in our harbours. And they also don't trust them because of the fact that our reservoir was approved by our councillors here as a spring water aquifer, and now those plans have changed and they've Southern Water have come forward and said they're going to be doing a consultation on and potentially bringing forward a plan for water recycling, and that is a new thing for our area. But with Southern Water's record, Southern Water have to do a lot better job of winning over the public that this is the right thing to do for our drinking water. I think that there is a bigger picture, though, to all of this, which is we have to make sure we keep in mind that we are a water-stressed region in the southeast, and I think we as a council are not saying we are rejecting all solutions and understanding that we're a water-stressed region. We need to make sure and think carefully that is this the solution, the right one for the southeast, and we've done our bit with a new reservoir, and that will make a big contribution towards water-stressed nature of the southeast, but there has to be a process to understand how do we get the solution required to ensure that water and drinking water in the southeast is there and needed, especially with climate change.
Dom, what are the alternatives?
Well, campaigners think that lots of smaller schemes could be considered, Alan, and that if they were all combined, they could achieve the same result. Another campaigning group said that almost 10 times as much water could be saved if plans to fix leaky pipes were brought forward instead. Southern Water has committed to cutting water loss from leaky pipes by 50%, but the target date is 2050, which is 27 years from now. And, of course, there have also been calls for Southern Water to capture more water in winter, perhaps by building more reservoirs, diverting water underground where it won't evaporate, and that, they say, would help to reduce the amount of flooding that we see in the winter months and also increase supply so more water was available in the dry summer months, Alan.
Thank you, Dom. Listening to that is Dr. Toby Willison, Director of Environment and Corporate Affairs for Southern Water. Toby, thank you for your time this morning. Why not simply go for a faster repair of your leaky pipes?
So good morning. Well, we are accelerating repairs of to leakage, reductions in leakage. We fully understand the concerns that customers have about leakage. We're investing significantly. We've fixed over 22,000 leaks in our region in the last year. As your reporter said, we're committed to reducing leaks by 15% by 2025.
So I'm assuming, Toby, that it must be cheaper to do this move than fix the leaky pipes. You've got 2050 as your target, but it's just on a basic cash level, it's too expensive to fix the leaky pipes super early, so we've got to come up with a better plan for that area. Is that right?
So there's 14,000 kilometres of pipes. They're all underground. Finding and fixing leaks is a real challenge. But the plans for water recycling, these are about providing long-term resilience of water supply.
Okay.
This is about accelerating the natural water cycle to ensure that we are ready for the impacts of climate change and a growing population.
Toby, the initial planning was for spring water at Havant Thicket. This would then not be a spring water reservoir. So that would change the planning restrictions around it. Would it also change the salinity of the water? Would it change the flavour and taste of the water?
So the Havant Thicket Reservoir will still predominantly be filled with spring water. The water that will go into Havant Thicket from the planned recycling plant will actually be lower in nutrients and contaminants than the spring water itself. So there won't be any environmental impact of putting recycled water into Havant Thicket. With all sources of water, the sort of the taste and any odour does vary around the country. So in the fullness of time, customers might see some variation, but we will still be meeting all the very stringent regulatory requirements on the quality of the water, and it will be wholesome and up to our normal very high standards.
Some residents saying it would be easier and more efficient, rather than putting in a massive new pipe network, to collect rainwater locally and have a more localised plan. Even at the moment, you've got some flooding there that is being, to all intents and purposes, being lost. Is that a viable option?
Well, I think the flooding that we're seeing at the moment, combined when you look at the intense drought that we had during the summer, just goes to show how rapidly our climate is changing. And these proposals are very much about providing long-term resilience to climate change. All the sorts of solutions that you're suggesting, temporary water storage, additional winter storage reservoirs, those will all be part of that long-term solution. But we cannot escape the fact that we are required to be taking less water from those internationally important chalk streams, and to do that we've got to find significant additional resources of water, and water recycling is the one that is both least environmentally damaging, most cost effective, and provides that long-term solution that we need to continue to secure supply to our customers.
That's Dr. Toby Willison, Director of Environment and Corporate Affairs for Southern Water. You can have your say. There is a public consultation scheduled to run until February the 20th, where the public can make their views known to DEFRA, and we are encouraging everyone to have a look, see the questions, share the feedback if you're in any way worried or thinking about that, or that is new news to you this morning. And I'm sure we'll have some links and bits and pieces on BBC Radio Solent's Facebook page as well. 18 minutes past 8.
The Sound. The sound of the South.